My grandmother could stretch a Sunday roast across 5 meals, name every neighbor on her street by their children's birthdays, and fix a broken chair with nothing but flour paste and a strip of linen. And none of that was unusual. Every woman on her road could do the same. Every man too, in his own way. That wasn't talent. It was culture. It was what British families did, without thinking, the way you breathe without deciding to. And then, over the course of about 40 years, almost all of it vanished. Not because we chose to abandon it, but because nobody told us it was disappearing until it was nearly gone. Today, I want to walk you through 10 traditions that shaped British family life for generations, and show you exactly how to bring each one back. There's a photograph from 1953, taken on a street in Salford, that tells you everything about what Britain used to be. It shows a coronation party. Tables dragged into the road, bunting made from bedsheets, every door on the terrace propped open. Children sit on laps that don't belong to their parents. Old men in waistcoats share plates with toddlers they're not related to. Nobody's performing for a camera. They're just together. That image didn't represent a special occasion. The coronation was the excuse, but the togetherness was the default. Families in post-war Britain lived within walking distance of grandparents, aunts, cousins. Streets functioned as extended living rooms. Children moved between houses the way air moves through an open window. Freely, constantly, without anyone tracking their location on a phone. What happened? It wasn't one thing. Between the 1960s and the early 2000s, a sequence of shifts dismantled the infrastructure of British family tradition almost completely. The motorway network scattered families across counties. Supermarkets replaced corner shops, removing the daily ritual of face-to-face commerce. Television moved conversation indoors, and then silenced it. Central heating closed front doors that had stayed open for ventilation and neighborliness alike. And the relentless economics of modern Britain. Longer commutes, dual income necessity, rising housing costs, pushing young families hours away from their parents, made the old rhythms physically impossible for millions. But here's what the data tells us now, and this is what matters. The traditions we lost weren't quaint. They were functional. They addressed loneliness, childhood development, financial resilience, nutrition, mental health, and community safety in ways that no app, no subscription service, and no government program has managed to replace. A 2023 report by the Campaign to End Loneliness found that Britain is spending an estimated $2.5 billion annually on health complications linked to social isolation. The traditions on this list cost nothing, and every single one of them can be restarted this week. Before screens filled Sunday afternoons, families did something that sounds almost radical now. They simply walked together. Not a hike, not a 10,000-step fitness challenge. A walk around the block, through the park, down to the canal and back, grandparents at the pace of grandparents, children running ahead and circling back like collies. The ritual wasn't about exercise, though a 2022 study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine confirmed that just 20 minutes of post-meal walking significantly improves blood sugar regulation. It was about unstructured conversation. It was the only time during the week when 3 generations moved at the same speed, in the same direction, with nothing else competing for attention. Harold Whitmore, who grew up in a terrace in Sheffield during the 1960s, told a local history project that Sunday walks were where he learned every important thing he knew about his family. Who'd fought in the war? Who'd nearly emigrated, which uncle wasn't spoken to and why? You can restart this tomorrow. No equipment, no plan, just coats and a direction. Doris Callahan kept a darning mushroom on her mantelpiece in Bootle until the day she died in 2004. And she wasn't sentimental about it. She just thought throwing away a good sock was obscene. Her generation mended everything. Elbows on jumpers, seams on trousers, handles on pans, hinges on cupboards. The idea that an object with one fault was finished would have bewildered them. This wasn't poverty thinking. It was resource intelligence. And the numbers confirm it. Wrap. That's the Waste and Resources Action Programme. Reported in 2024 that UK households discard approximately 350,000 tons of clothing annually that could have been repaired. The average British family spends over £1,800 a year on clothing. A basic repair kit, needle, thread, iron-on patches, fabric glue. Costs under £4 and can extend the life of a garment by years. What shifted wasn't our ability, it was our patience. Fast fashion and next-day delivery trained us to see replacement as easier than repair. But the families I've spoken to who've reintroduced mending, particularly with children involved, report something unexpected. It slows the household down. It creates a shared task that isn't a screen. A mother in Bristol told me her 8-year-old now patches his own school trousers and genuinely takes pride in it. That's not nostalgia. That's a life skill returning. If you've ever wondered why loneliness became a public health crisis in Britain, the answer might be as simple as a front doorstep. For most of the 20th century, the front step wasn't just architecture, it was infrastructure. Women scrubbed it, men leaned against the frame, children sat on it, neighbors stopped at it. It was the place where news traveled, favors were exchanged, arguments were settled, and eyes kept watch without anyone using the word surveillance. A 2023 study from the University of Sheffield's Department of Urban Studies found that streets with regular front-of-house interaction had measurably lower rates of reported burglary and antisocial behavior compared to streets where residents primarily used rear entrances or stayed indoors. The mechanism is straightforward. Visible human presence deters opportunism, but the deeper loss is social. The Office for National Statistics reported in early 2025 that nearly half of adults in England reported feeling lonely at least some of the time. Among those over 75, the figure approached 60%. The doorstep tradition didn't cure loneliness. Nothing does on its own. But it created what researchers call weak ties. Brief, repeated, low-pressure interactions with people nearby. And those weak ties, according to decades of sociological research, are among the strongest predictors of community well-being. You don't need to scrub your step with cardinal red and a bristle brush like your nan did, but 5 minutes standing outside your front door with a cup of tea, twice a week, changes the geometry of your street. People begin to stop. Conversations begin. It compounds. Long before Waitrose started stamping seasonal on everything and charging 40 pence more for the privilege, British families ate with the calendar without thinking twice. Rhubarb in spring, strawberries in June, runner beans in August, parsnips after the first frost. Not because a cookbook told them to, but because that was what existed. The economic argument alone should make you reconsider. Seasonal produce bought at the right time, particularly from greengrocers, market stalls, or farm shops, can cost between 30 and 60% less than out-of-season equivalents air-freighted from another hemisphere. A report from Sustain, the Food and Farming Alliance, found in 2024 that a family of 4 following a broadly seasonal diet could reduce their annual grocery bill by an estimated $400 to $600 without any reduction in nutritional quality. And there's the taste dimension, which sounds obvious, but bears repeating. A tomato grown in Kent in August and sold at a farmer's market has almost nothing in common with a tomato grown under artificial light in Spain in January and shipped in a modified atmosphere container. They share a name. That's about it. Stanley Earnshaw, a retired greengrocer from Huddersfield, spent 53 years selling fruit and vegetables from a market stall. He once told a local paper that the saddest change he'd witnessed was children who didn't know that strawberries had a season. They think they grow all year round, he said. They think everything does. Reconnecting with seasonal rhythms doesn't require a lifestyle overhaul. It starts with one question at the shop. What's actually in season right now? A 9-year-old in 1978 could be trusted to walk to the corner shop, ask Mr. Patel for a quarter pound of ham, count the change, and come home. And nobody called it neglect. That child was learning arithmetic, social interaction, navigation, responsibility, and independence in a single errand that took 12 minutes. I want to be careful here, because the world has changed and parental caution isn't irrational. But the evidence suggests we've overcorrected in ways that carry their own risks. A 2024 report by the Children's Commissioner for England noted that British children's independent mobility, the ability to travel, play, and complete tasks without adult supervision, has declined more steeply than in almost any other European country over the past 40 years. The consequences are measurable. Reduced spatial awareness, delayed practical problem-solving skills, and higher rates of anxiety linked to a lack of autonomous experience. The kitchen was the other classroom. Children peeled potatoes, washed lettuce, stirred sauces, and, critically, learned to handle a knife under supervision, rather than being shielded from one entirely. Linda Morris, who raised 4 children in a council flat in Gateshead during the 1980s, told a community oral history project that every one of her children could prepare a full evening meal by the age of 12. "Not because I was lazy," she said, "because what if something happened to me?" They needed to be able to feed themselves. This tradition restarts with a single delegation, one task, one errand, age-appropriate, supervised at first, then gradually released. The goal isn't to recreate 1978, it's to remember that competence is built through trust, and trust requires opportunity. I need to stop here for a moment, because as I was pulling this research together, a pattern emerged that I wasn't expecting. The first 6 traditions I've described, walking together, mending, doorstep culture, seasonal eating, children's independence, and kitchen skills. They all share something. None of them required spending money. In fact, most of them actively saved it. They weren't luxuries that faded because families couldn't afford them. They faded because industries grew up to replace them. And those industries needed you to stop doing things for yourself. Think about it. The mending tradition didn't collapse because thread became expensive. It collapsed because clothing became so cheap that mending felt pointless. Doorstep culture didn't vanish because people stopped liking their neighbors. It vanished because entertainment moved indoors, and algorithm-driven content became more immediately stimulating than small talk with the woman at number 42. Seasonal eating didn't disappear because people rejected fresh food. It disappeared because global supply chains made every fruit available every month, and supermarkets profited from that confusion. The 4 traditions I'm about to share with you are different. They're the ones that connect all the others. They're the ones that, if you bring them back, tend to pull the rest along with them. And the reason they were lost is... honestly, it's the reason that made me angriest. There's a charity in Leeds called the Recipe Archive, and they've been digitizing handwritten family recipe books since 2019. They've processed over 4,000 so far, and the thing that strikes you, when you look through them, isn't the recipes themselves. Though some are extraordinary. It's the handwriting, the stains, the crossings out, the notes in the margins. Albert likes this with extra mustard. Don't use the big pan, the handle's loose. Ethel's version? Better. These books were never published. They were never meant to be. They were living documents, passed from mother to daughter, sometimes from father to son, amended with every generation. They contained not just ingredients and instructions, but an edible history of a family's taste, health, budget, and geography. The University of Exeter's Centre for Food Policy published research in 2023, suggesting that families who cook from inherited or shared recipes report higher levels of food satisfaction and lower reliance on ultra-processed alternatives. The mechanism isn't complicated. When you cook your grandmother's shepherd's pie, you're not just following a recipe, you're maintaining a connection. And that connection makes the effort feel meaningful rather than tedious. You don't need a leather-bound journal. A school notebook works. Start writing down the meals your family actually makes, the ones everyone asks for again. Include the mistakes. Include the shortcuts. Date the entries. In 20 years, that notebook will be one of the most valuable things you own, and it will have cost you less than £1. Not the official scheme with the yellow stickers. I'm talking about the real thing. The informal, unstructured, entirely voluntary network of human attention that kept streets safe for decades without a single committee meeting or fluorescent vest. It worked like this. Doris at number 12 knew that Mr. Henderson at number 9 always left for work at 7:15. If his car was still there at 8, she'd knock. Not because she was nosy, because something might be wrong. Kevin, 2 doors down, knew that old Mrs. Barker's kitchen light came on at 6 every morning. If it didn't, he'd check. Parents knew which children belonged on which streets, and a child walking alone at an unusual hour would be gently questioned. "Are you all right, love? Where's your mum?" This wasn't organized, it was organic, and it rested on a single foundation. People knew each other's patterns. That knowledge, which required no technology, no subscription, no app, created a mesh of passive surveillance that was astonishingly effective. A 2023 report from the Home Office's analysis of neighborhood crime patterns found that areas with high levels of informal social cohesion experienced lower rates of property crime, even when controlling for income levels and police presence. The researchers described it as the eyes on the street effect, borrowing from the urbanist Jane Jacobs, who identified the same phenomenon in the 1960s. Rebuilding this doesn't require a neighborhood meeting. It requires learning 2 names. Your immediate next-door neighbors on either side, their rough schedules, whether they live alone. That's the seed. Everything else grows from it. A 2024 survey by the Food Foundation found that 1 in 4 British adults under 30 cannot cook a meal from scratch without a recipe app. 1 in 7 said they had never cooked a meal entirely from raw ingredients. The most commonly cited reason wasn't lack of interest, it was lack of teaching. Nobody showed them. For most of British history, this wasn't a gap that could exist. Cooking was transmitted the way language was, through immersion, repetition, and proximity. You stood next to someone who cooked. You watched. You helped. You failed. You tried again. By the time you left home, you had a repertoire of perhaps 15 to 20 meals that you could produce from memory, under budget, without waste. The collapse of home economics in schools, largely defunded from the 1990s onward, removed one safety net. But the bigger loss was domestic. When both parents work full-time, when evenings are compressed, when convenience food is genuinely faster, the teaching window closes. And once a generation misses it, the next generation has nothing to pass on. Mohammed Asghar, a father of 3 in Birmingham, told me he realized the problem when his 17-year-old daughter left for university and called home. On the 3rd night to ask how to boil an egg. "I felt like I'd failed her," he said. Not because boiling an egg is hard, because I'd spent 17 years assuming she'd just absorb it. She didn't. You have to actually teach it. The restart is simple, but requires commitment. 1 meal a week, cooked together. Not a performance, not a masterclass. Just a parent and a child, side by side, making Tuesday's dinner. Within a year, that child has 52 meals in their muscle memory. That's a foundation for life. This is the one that holds all the others together, and it's the one we lost most completely. The Sunday meal, not the food itself, but the gathering around it, was the structural beam of British family life for centuries. Grandparents, parents, children, sometimes aunts and uncles and cousins, around a single table, eating the same food at the same time, with nowhere else to be. It wasn't always pleasant. Families argued, children were bored. The washing up was miserable. But the ritual did something that no digital substitute has replicated. It forced 3 generations into sustained face-to-face contact on a regular schedule. And that contact, even when it was awkward, even when it was tense, built the connective tissue that held families together through illness, job losses, bereavements, and every other crisis that life delivered. A longitudinal study published in 2023 by researchers at the University of Edinburgh tracked family meal frequency across 2,000 households over 12 years. The findings were striking. Families who maintained weekly shared meals, regardless of what was served or how elaborate the cooking, reported higher levels of adolescent well-being, stronger intergenerational communication, and greater willingness among adult children to provide care for aging parents. The researchers described regular shared meals as the most reliable low-cost predictor of family resilience in the dataset. The obstacle, for most modern families, is geography. Grandparents in Dorset, children in Manchester, parents working weekends. I'm not going to pretend that's easily solved, but I will say this. A video call is not the same, but a video call during which everyone eats the same meal, coordinated in advance, cooked from the same recipe, is closer than you think. 3 families I've spoken to who adopted this practice described it as transformative. It's not the screen, one grandmother in Swansea told me. It's the ritual. It's knowing that every Sunday at 1 o'clock, we're all doing the same thing. And for families who do live within traveling distance, the only barrier is the decision to start. It doesn't need to be a roast. It doesn't need to be elaborate. It needs to be consistent. Same day, same time. Everyone expected. That's the tradition. Everything else is just seasoning. None of what I've described requires money. Not one of these traditions asks you to buy a product, download an app, or subscribe to a service. They ask you to do things that your grandparents did without thinking. Walk, mend, stand outside, eat what's in season, trust your children with a task, write things down, know your neighbors, cook together, and sit at a table with the people you love. That's not nostalgia. Nostalgia is passive. It looks backward and sighs. What I'm describing is reclamation, the active, deliberate decision to take back practices that worked, that cost nothing, and that were quietly replaced by industries that charged you for inferior substitutes. You don't need to bring back all 10 at once. Pick one. The one that resonated most. The one where you thought, we used to do that. Start this week. Do it badly if you have to. The mending won't be neat. The walk will be short. The Sunday meal might be beans on toast with your mum on speakerphone. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you started. And if you've watched this far, you already know something. That most people haven't stopped long enough to realize, the things we lost weren't taken from us by force. They were dissolved by convenience. And convenience, as useful as it is, never once asked whether the thing it replaced was worth keeping. I've got a follow-up to this video already in progress, focusing on 10 lost community traditions, the ones that happened between families rather than within them. If that sounds like something you'd want to see, subscribe so it reaches you. And in the comments, I'd like to ask you something. Which tradition on this list did your family practice? Which one did you lose? And which one are you going to bring back first? Tell me. I read every single comment, and the stories you share help shape what I investigate next. This channel exists because enough people decided that remembering matters. Let's keep proving that it does.